Oh, okay. Okay.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I see that we have Julie and Sylvia on the board. And Garrett Craig will be here and Lauren Burmeister.
I'm here, Dave. My camera's just not working.
Pardon?
I'm here. Garrett's here. My camera's just not working for some reason, Dave.
Okay, Garrett. So I think we're ready to start. It's now a little bit after 5:30, which is the advertised time and date for this meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment to commence. So I will now call the meeting to order. This is a WebEx meeting and people will be appearing virtually. I would first of all like to introduce the staff The staff members that are present are Lori Casey. I know Carol Laird is present. She's not visible, but she's in the office and be recording the minutes of the meeting. Will Dylan be here, Lauren?
Yes, he's here.
Okay. And Dylan Pipinich is also here in the planning office. The board members that are present are Julie Jackshaw, Sylvia Cunningham, Garrett Craig, Lauren Burmeister, and myself. My name is Dave Wing, and I'm the chairman of the meeting tonight. First matter that we need to consider are the minutes of the last meeting, and they've been submitted for your approval. Has anybody had an opportunity to review those minutes? And,
Dave, this is Lauren. I have reviewed the minutes and I would move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second from anyone? Julie? Julie?
Meetings I could second them. I wasn't at that meeting, Dave.
No, we'd have to have somebody that was present. I believe that Garrett was.
Yeah, Dave, I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the last meeting. All in favor indicate by raising their hands. And everybody I can see has raised their hands, and so the minutes have been approved. The application that we have tonight is application number 16818, an application by Mark Huntington. And Mr. Huntington is present. I see him. And is there a report with regard to this from Lori or Dylan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a staff report. Let me share my screen. We'll start the PowerPoint. So this is application number 16818. The applicant is Mark Huntington with the Copper T. And the item for tonight is an application at the request of the Zoning Board of Adjustment to evaluate impacts and appropriate conditions for a use variance that was granted upon appeal to operate a rental truck facility in an R3 zone. Sorry. So the proposal and some history here, in June of 2019, the Copper T applied and received a use variance to locate a screen printing and embroidery business at the parcel. In May of 2020, Butte-Silver code enforcement staff sent a violation letter to the Copper T for operating a rental truck facility on site without zoning board approval. In July of 2020, the applicant appealed the zoning officer's decision that a truck rental facility was not permitted in the zone. The Zoning Board of Adjustment granted that appeal with the following condition: that the appellant shall complete a use variance application and turn it into the planning department within 3 months. Here is the subject parcel. So the intent behind that condition was so that the zoning board could evaluate and mitigate any impacts that the U-Haul business would have on the surrounding neighborhood. So here's the neighborhood and the subject parcel. It's at 5,000 Continental Drive. Staff findings: subject parcel is located within the R3 multifamily residence zone. It is not listed as a permitted use in the zone. The U-Haul business is not. A variance upon appeal was granted to the applicant to allow the business to remain in July of 2020. To satisfy this condition of approval, the applicant has submitted a complete application to evaluate the impacts and mitigating conditions for the U-Haul business. That's what we're here to do tonight. So for reference, truck terminals are a permitted use in the CM, which is commercial and light industrial zone, and the rental service storage yards are permitted uses in the M1 light industrial zone. And typically in use variance applications, the requirements of those corresponding zones, the requirements of the corresponding zone that the proposed use is permitted in are usually applied as conditions of approval. So here's the zoning map, the subject parcel outlined in red. You can see it's the lighter green color is R3, R1 single family residence to the west, I-90 to the east with single family suburban east of that, and then there is a commercial zone a couple properties to the south. So planning staff, this application is a little bit different. We typically review the criteria and then make a recommendation to whether the variance is appropriate or not. The variance has been granted in this situation, so planning staff reviewed the same criteria for granting variances to evaluate any associated impacts that the U-Haul rental facility may impose on the surrounding neighborhood and to suggest mitigating measures for consideration as conditions of approval to that use variance for the U-Haul rental business. So the criteria number one is variance must not be contrary to the public interest. Let's see if I can hide it. Sorry. I'm having trouble seeing my screen. Oh, there it goes. The public interest in segregating land uses is to prevent conflicts between incompatible land uses. So in this particular case, the applicant is utilizing the parcel record that has always been utilized for commercial purposes. Applicant operates an embroidery business inside the structure and is now operating the U-Haul rental facility in the storage yard. And I should also note that the applicant lives in the apartment above the embroidery business. So the applicant estimates that there's anywhere from 5 to 20 trucks and trailers that enter and leave the facility per day. As you can see in this picture that I took this morning, there are several trailers and trucks that are being stored in the yard. As part of his business plan, typically trucks are rented during business hours, but he does provide 24-hour drop-off service. The trucks are, and you'll see in later pictures, they're usually dropped off in the southern parking lot and they're stored in the north storage yard. At the time of application, the applicant stated that they have a current inventory of 23 trucks and 57 trailers stored at the facility. I would like to note that there was a prior use variance granted for a trucking company at this location, and one of the conditions of approval was that the applicant was limited to 3 trucks and 5 trailers. Staff does believe that the increase in outside storage does create additional impacts that should be mitigated. To continue with criteria number 1, any industrial storage yard adjacent to a residential zone is required to be screened from view. In this case, while the parcel is completely surrounded by a residential zoning district, the majority of the residential development is to the west and to the north. The interstate is to the east and it's vacant to the south. In this picture, you can see the Country Club Estates on the left. There's some multifamily housing located a ways to the north. On the right there, you can see that's the applicant's fence and their property boundary. Here's another picture of that fence and property boundary with some trailers. Staff believes that at a minimum, screening on the north and west sides of the storage yard may be an appropriate condition to mitigate some of those visual impacts on the neighborhood. In regards to increased traffic, the applicant has stated that the trucks and trailers are typically dropped off by the customers on the southern parking lot. This does help reduce after-hours traffic from impacting nearby residences. However, it may cause congestion in that southern parking lot where spaces have not been delineated. It may be appropriate to delineate some parking spaces in this parking lot. Criteria number 2 is a literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance must result in an unnecessary hardship owing to the conditions unique to the property. So if you recall, during the appeal hearing, the applicant stated that the property is located within the 100-year floodplain, and it is within a zone AE floodplain. Parking lots are an improved use within regulated floodplains without a permit. So staff does agree that that floodplain constitutes a hardship and that a parking lot or storage is a good use of property in regards to the floodplain. In regards to the applicant's plan that they submitted with the application in the event of a flood, they had mentioned that they have several staff members that can move all the trucks and the trailers within 3 hours. Staff believes that plan needs a little bit more detail as where the trucks and trailers would be moved to make sure that all impacts are mitigated and to make sure that where they're moving to is an appropriate location, and i.e. not in another floodplain. The spirit of the zoning ordinance must be observed and substantial justice done. That's the third criteria. So with this criteria, we're looking at public health and safety and general welfare. Staff's concern regarding public safety and general welfare is related to the use of that southern parking lot. There have been times staff has noticed that parking lot can get pretty congested when there's a lot of U-Haul trucks parked in there. And I'd also like to note that because the embroidery business is there as well, that there's required parking for that business as well. So to avoid that congestion and confusion, staff believes that delineating the parking spaces may be appropriate. So in conclusion, staff recommends the Zoning Board of Adjustment requires the following conditions to mitigate impacts of the use variance to operate a U-Haul rental business that was approved upon appeal on July 16th, 2020. Number one, the applicant shall screen the west and north sides of the truck trailer storage yard with fence slats. The screening shall be completed by March 1st, 2021. Number two, the applicant shall obtain a business license from the Butte-Silver Treasurer's Office to include the U-Haul rental facility. Number three, prior to receiving a business license, the applicant shall provide a detailed flood hazard mitigation plan, including where the trucks and trailers shall be moved to in the event of a flood for review and approval by the planning department, with the sole purpose to ensure the temporary storage area is adequate and appropriate. Number four, the applicant shall not store inoperable trucks or trailers at the facility, and no maintenance shall be conducted on site. Number five, prior to receiving a business license, the applicant shall provide a parking plan for review and approval by the planning department, and at minimum, the applicant shall stripe the customer parking and U-Haul return areas by May 1st, 2021. And finally, number six, the applicant, any future business expansions or changes in business will require further review by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And with that, I would welcome any questions from the board. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Dylan. Do any board members have any questions of the staff? I'm not hearing any, so the applicant now has an opportunity to comment on the staff report and make a presentation providing information that might be useful to the board. Mr. Huntington?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and thanks for that, Dylan. So I'll just run through kind of the last things that Dylan went over there, and that first one, just with what the Zoning Board of Adjustment would require with the screening of the fence. All of the rest of these I don't have any issues with, but this one I do have a small problem with, just because of the cost that it would take to put up the screening in the fence, and because of the fact that normally we try to keep our yard pretty nice, so I don't think it looks too bad. I think if that we were required to put up screens or slats in the fence, my cheapest cost that I've come out to figure that it would cost is around $4,000 to us. And that's if we bought the cheapest slats and installed it with the employees here at the shop, which is not something that would be super conducive to our business here. So it'd be a financial burden to do that. Plus, the other thing that I think about slats on a fence is generally I generally think of a fence with slats in it is there to cover up what is behind it. And I think it makes it look like it's a junkyard or a long-term storage yard, which our yard is certainly not. Our U-Haul trucks do turn around quite regularly. At the time of the application, we did have a lot more trucks than we normally do. Just for example, right now we have 14 trucks, and so quite a bit less than we did at the time of the application. We had a lot more at that time just because there have been so many people moving to town, but the trucks do rotate in and out. We have 49 trailers, so still close to the same amount of trailers, but we're also going to do something about getting most of those transferred out of our lot as time goes on. So it's not necessarily a super long-term storage area for the trucks or the trailers. And we do try to keep it looking pretty nice and tidy. And so then I also think that having slats in the fence would make it look more like a junkyard and make it look worse than it does right now. Now we maintain the field. We're thinking about putting gravel down in the field that has grass growing, just to keep it looking nice and maintain like a good look for the neighborhood. Then the other thing is just the financial hardship that would cause us to have to replace those slats. You know, slats get holes in them and get sun wear and deteriorate over time, and it's something that we'd have to constantly maintain and constantly replace. And that's the only issue I have with any of these requests. One of the other things that I really think is important is that the U-Haul trucks are painted with the U-Haul logo. They are very recognizable. Everyone knows a U-Haul truck from a ways away. The advertising that we get from being able to showcase the trucks, especially with how we park them in the lot, I think is beneficial to a marketing standpoint for our business. And so with the slats in the fence, it takes away from that. And so I guess that would be one of the more major things with it. So I would hope that it's okay that we can do this without having to install the fence slats. Everything else, as far as obtaining a business license and having a specific area where we're going to a more detailed flood hazard mitigation plan, we can certainly do that. I don't have the exact address of the property, but it's a property that's up behind the Benai Israel Cemetery. It's owned by my brother-in-law. I've already spoken to him. He says that's totally fine that we move the trailers and trucks there in the event of a flood. So we can certainly get a plan together for that in writing and give that to the zoning board or whoever would need it. And then we don't do any service on the trucks, so there won't be any times where if there's a broken down truck, generally someone comes and gets it fairly quickly within at least a week. So we don't do any service. We won't have any broken down equipment on our property that's sitting there looking bad. And then providing a parking plan, I totally agree with. It's something that we've been thinking about doing for a while as well, is having lines painted and getting the parking lot more situated, because we have noticed that it does get a little busy at times. And so the other thing is that we would like to put up signs that designate where return areas are, but we haven't done any sign stuff just because we were waiting on this to go through before we apply for sign variances. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Huntington. Do any of the board members have any questions of the applicant?
Mr. Huntington, have you had any
Absolutely.
complaints from any
No, I haven't
stopped
received
in
any.
to complain about the yard or the trucks or?
No, we haven't received any complaints.
Thank you.
Any other board members have any questions of the applicant?
Yeah, I maybe do. Mr. Huntington, have you considered, I understand your concern with the slats, and as I look at it, maybe there are other ways to, keep a nice facade out front rather than slats. Have you considered, additional bushes or trees or something else you could do that might be a little more cost effective than obviously lining several hundred feet of slats?
Thank you, Mr. Burmeister. No, we have not considered that, but I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it. We don't actually own the land that is in between the road and our property that's on the back side of or the north side of our lot. So we would have to do something inside the fence. Most of that is gravel and has been, I know, sprayed with some pretty intense, I guess, just weed killer and all that. So farther back, I know we probably could. And I wouldn't be opposed to making it look a little nicer and installing stuff like that. I think that would actually do a lot for the yard. So I appreciate that recommendation and wouldn't probably have any problems with that at all.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions by the board? Okay, not hearing any. Now is the time where public comment can be submitted. And the public comment, since this is a virtual meeting, will have to be by telephone. And is the number flashed up there somewhere?
I do not see it, Mr. Chairman.
I don't see it. It'll
Mr.
be in a
Chairman?
second.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, while we're waiting for the number, I'd like to note that planning staff did not receive any written comments.
Oh, thank you for letting us know that. Okay, anybody listening, the number that you'll have to call has been flashed up on the screen. It's 497-5009. And I will first of all ask for any comments by people in support of the application. So anybody that's in support of this application can now call that number. Okay, we have one call already?
We already have a call.
We are, John has told me that we already have a call, so we'll go ahead and take the call and listen to the comment.
Hello, caller. You've reached the zoning board meeting. Please state your name and address and make your comment.
Let me mute my, just to link the live stream, it was really hard to hear. But anyway, for the record, my name is Sean Frederickson. I reside at 3070 Atherton Lane. I am Butte-Silver Commissioner for District 1, where this business resides. And I'm just calling to be in support of.
I can't hear anything.
Just to come out onto the record that, you know, I have not received one complaint about this all business only. And everyone that I've heard and talked to states that Mr. Huntington is a great neighbor. And so I have the support of the variant. Also, I will note that
Mr. Chairman, I can't hear any of the comments that are being made.
Excuse me, Mr. Frederickson.
Let's start.
We're having some audio problems. So I'm going to ask you to please pause for a moment and then I'll get back to you.
First, the function to make the comments is the commissioner for the district, Sean Frederickson.
You want to check that too? Okay.
Okay, Mr. Frederickson, can you kind of repeat your comment a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I was just kind of going on there, Chairman Wing, but I fully understand. Sometimes we have these issues. So can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. For the record, my name is Sean Frederickson. I reside at 3070 Atherton Lane here in Butte. I'm Butte-Silver Commissioner for District 1, where this business is located. I just want to come out in support of granting the variance for the U-Haul business and Mr. Huntington. I have not, since the U-Haul business has gone in there, I have not heard one complaint from any of my constituents regarding this business. So I would like to see it continue to be there. From everyone that I've talked to, Mr. Huntington's a great neighbor and keeps it nice and tidy. Everything looks great. And I guess the one point that I would like to make, and I hate to do this to Director Casey and Assistant Director Pipinich, but I would have to disagree with the conclusion on adding the slats to the fence. And well, one reason is before then there was a Jeffrey contractor at that location, and that wasn't required of them. And they had far bigger trucks than these U-Hauls. So I don't think that that's really fair to require Mr. Huntington to do it when we didn't require Jeffrey to do it. And I know that his requirement was 3 to 5 trucks, but anyone that drove past there knew that he had way more than 3 to 5 trucks. And these were heavy equipment that he was hauling rock. So that would be my only disagreement with the conclusion. And I hate to do it to Director Casey and Assistant Director Pipinich because I think they do a wonderful job, and they're great workers for our city and county. So and then I would also like to end on just thanking the zoning board for the work that you do and the service that you do. I know that it can be a thankless job. Believe you me, I know in the position that I am. So I just want to personally thank you guys for being on this board and the work you do. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frederickson, for your comments.
No.
Nobody else is queued up.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I can't hear you now.
Well, that's because they pulled away my microphone. I didn't realize it. So I thank Mr. Frederickson for his comments. John Coles up here has advised me that nobody else has queued up to comment either way. So I'm going to give a few seconds to anybody who might be in support of this application to make a comment by phone. And after a little bit, I'm going to ask for the record if there are any opponents. So anybody in support of the application, please make your call now. Okay, nobody has called. So I will now ask for anybody in opposition to the application to please call. No calls from anybody who might be in opposition to the application. So I will now close the public portion of the meeting and open up the board discussion. I myself live right there, fourth or fifth closest to the applicant's business. I live at 33 Redwood and across the drive from the business. Somewhat screened from the business by the residents of Bartholomew, but otherwise I can see it to a large degree. And I would like to comment that everything seems to be extremely well maintained by Mr. Huntington. I haven't noticed any problems myself as a resident. I'm really not sure as a resident in the area if I support the idea of slats, since I haven't noticed any particular problems. But,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't hear that comment. You do support slats or you don't?
No, Julie.
Okay.
As a resident of the area, I am not in support of slats. I kind of think that they can't look like a walled-off junk area, and it's anything but that. I've lived in that particular area for 25 years, both when Booth Landscaping was there and when Jeffrey Contracting was there. And I don't see the need for slats myself, but that's me. And if the board members might think differently, and that's okay.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question of the staff again?
Sure.
Um,
This is the Art Burmeister.
Thank you. Yeah, I was wondering if staff could give us kind of the basis of the slats or other blinding from visual blinds, and whether there's maybe some other alternatives, or just have a discussion around that.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Burmeister, the condition around the slats really centers from typically, as I stated during the presentation, in use variances, we kind of go back to the requirements of the zone where this would be permitted. And as I said, this was an industrial use. And in the zoning ordinance, straight out industrial uses need to be screened from residential uses. So other places in town, or if this were to be a new construction, or the zoning ordinance would straight up require that. So that's where the condition comes from. In regards to other businesses that have been there, Booth Landscaping, Jeffries, they were actually conditions of approval of those variances, of those use variances, were screening. Screening was never completed. There was another trucking business there, Jeremy Dale. I don't think he ever even moved in. They had suggested planting trees along Continental Drive. However, the screening on all these businesses was never completed. A lot of the businesses weren't there long enough to get that done. An issue that staff looked at for this is, as Mark said, his property is the fence. He doesn't own anything really outside of the fence. So that was why the staff recommended that slat screening, just to be consistent with, we didn't necessarily believe that the U-Haul trucks were disorganized or anything like that in the yard, but just for the pure simplicity of screening industrial uses from residential uses, as required in other areas of the zoning ordinance, is why that condition was applied, to be consistent. So as far as other screening, the ordinance doesn't necessarily require slats. It just says screen from view. If you have some other creative ways to do such, that would meet that requirement, slats was the suggestion from staff. Does that clear up your question, Mr. Burmeister?
It does. As I think about, I drive by the property, daily. I tend to agree with Mark. It is a good advertising for him to be able to have those trucks out in view. I don't think they need to be hidden from view, and I actually would prefer that they continue to use the trucks over, the alternative of putting up signs or something. So I don't know that I feel strongly either way on this, and I'll kind of defer to other zoning boards members' opinions. But thanks for the clarification.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Lauren.
if I could just add to what Dylan said, and I appreciate what board member Mr. Burmeister said, you do have to keep in mind that this is a use variance that runs with the land. So if Mr. Huntington is to sell that property and someone else moves in that doesn't keep that property as neat as Mr. Huntington does, you don't have anything if you don't have any kind of condition. So I would just keep that in mind as the board is discussing this, is remember that when you grant a use variance, it doesn't run with the person or the owner, it runs with the land.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Julie.
thank you, both Ms. Casey and Mr. Pipinich, for your comments. I am not in favor of the slats at all. I personally think the businesses have a hard time keeping them up, and then when they do get worn, they look worse than if they weren't there, in my opinion. So I don't know if Mr. Huntington could look for an alternative. I guess I'm not familiar with how far in he could look to plant a buffer there, trees or bushes or shrubs, but I actually think that the property the way it is very well maintained. And I guess I wouldn't think about slotting it in or covering it, or, I realize that that's a zoning and that we are looking at changing the zoning in Butte and cleaning up properties. But on this particular piece of property, I'm strongly against requiring the slats. And I don't know that planting trees or shrubs will have the effect that we're hoping for either. So I don't know what the alternative would be, I guess.
Thank you, Julie. Any further comments by any board members? I'm with Julie on, I don't see the need for slats myself. So that's my comment with regard to it.
Mr. Chair, could we ask a question of Mr. Huntington? I mean, does he feel like there's adequate space within that property to do some sort of landscaping where he could put up some greenery to kind of break it up a little bit? Or does he feel like that's not an option really? I mean, I know that you had said, Mark, that it's graveled and it's been treated several times with product and stuff. Well, I guess I'd want to know what your feelings are. And then are you able to make those changes under the buy-sell agreement to that property, or?
We can allow that. Mr. Huntington, you can answer Ms. Jackson's question.
Thank you. So as far as I know, I'd be willing to try whatever I need to do to make this whatever you guys wish that it would be. I don't know how well it would cover anything up. It might add to some appeal, and so I wouldn't be against putting some trees up. As I did mention, and Julie had mentioned, there is gravel that runs all the way down to the fence for the most part on the middle section of our land. So we might be able to clear some away. I don't know a ton about landscaping at all, or whether we could get some trees there. I'd certainly be willing to try putting some trees in on the back, maybe third of what the property is. It's like the back acre of the property, the north end. Certainly, I think those would be fine. There's plenty of tall grass that grows well there. And so I could certainly do that. I could definitely try putting some trees in. Again, to repeat what Julie said, I don't think it would block any view, but it may add to the appeal. So I'd be up for trying whatever. I don't know if there's a required number of trees that I need to put in, but I would certainly maintain making it look as good as we can make it look. So I'm not against that at all. I'm up for doing whatever I need to do as long as we can continue running our business here.
Thank you, Mr. Huntington. Any further comments by board members? All right, then is anybody in a position to make a motion? Nobody's in it. Want to discuss this further?
Mr. Chair, would the motion be to approve the variance request, remove the condition of the slats, and then look at the feasibility of putting up some sort of natural screening on that north side? Is that what the rest of the board members feel is adequate, or does anybody have any input on that?
Well, what we would be doing would be eliminating condition number 1 with regard to screening the west and north sides with fence slats. That would be gone entirely, and then we could have a condition that the applicant would submit a landscaping proposal to the planning staff along the lines of what we discussed here, and maybe a way could be found to put some trees, shrubs, or bushes nearer the fence, or maybe not. But we've got a general idea of what it is we want to have happen there. Those slats, more greenery. So that would be the condition. Could I adequately set that forth?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would just add that, just to clarify for Ms. Jackshaw, that you have already approved basically the use variance that was done under the appeal. So this hearing tonight is for any conditions that you feel are necessary. So the use has been approved. It was approved under when the appeal was done.
Thank you.
Well, I'm always in support of some more trees, shrubs, bushes, that type of thing. So I would be okay with that. But it depends on what the rest of the board members want to do.
So I would go ahead then and make the motion, Mr. Chairman, that we approve the variance number, sorry, I have to pull it up, 16818, the conditions in that variance with the removal of the slat requirement along the fence and the addition with the zoning team to install some sort of greenery or some sort of, natural barrier to provide some shield to the yard.
This is Lauren. I would second that.
It's been moved and seconded, and we can now vote. With regard to voting, we have a paper ballot that has to be filled out. And I think it could be scanned and emailed to the staff or faxed to the planning staff. If you want, you can bring it up tomorrow. I'm here, so it's easy for me. I'll just drop it. So I will now ask for the votes, but I do want people to know that this has to be filled out, so there's a paper record for our decision here tonight. So everybody in favor of the motion of Ms. Jackshaw, indicate by raising their hands. Well, first, I don't see Garrett or Lauren. Lauren, what is your vote on that motion?
I am for the motion. Yeah.
Yeah. Garrett?
I'm for it.
Julie's for it. Garrett?
I am also for it, Dave.
Garrett's for it. Sylvia's for it. I'm for it. So that's all of the votes, and it is passed 5-0. So, Mr. Huntington, your application has been approved, with the exception that you will not be required to provide slats with regard to the fence. You will be required to submit a landscaping plan to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, indicating trees, shrubs, or whatnot you believe would be appropriate for your application for your business, provide further appeal to the areas you indicated. You understand that?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So don't forget to mark your paper ballot, sign it and date it. Thank you, Mr. Huntington. Is there any
Thank you.
further business there?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have any further business.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would just give you an update. We did talk to you about changing the bylaws in regards to an appeal. Staff is not ready to present that to you yet, but we will have something for you probably at the January meeting. So I just wanted to let you know that we're still working on that. To present to the board. And we wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And hopefully maybe sometime in January we can celebrate together.
Thank you, Lori.
Same to all of you. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays to everyone.
I'm going to have to get a hearing aid. I can never hear Dave.
Can't hear me too well?
I couldn't hear you during the meeting.
Should have been able to hear me, shouldn't you? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Better.